Roywood Jr., who's been a friend of ours for so many years, grew up in Birmingham, one of the great comedians right now in this country. His new show just started on CNN. Have I got news for you? Roy, first of all, thank you for dropping in. How are you?
Paul, I'm good. You forgot the number one stat about me, Paul. I witnessed the first three SEC championship games from Legion Field when Steve Spurrier used to come to Birmingham and put that thigh out on Gene Stallings on a regular basis until we finally got it right.
Yeah. I wish I'd like to forget those couple of afternoons at Legion
Oh,
Field in freezing cold and rain.
well, I sold sodas at Legion Field as a stadium vendor, and let me tell you something. When Alabama's losing, Bama fans are better tippers. I made a lot of money as a 14-year-old child, Paul Finebaum.
Well, so Roy, I got a quick question. Your show just started on CNN. It's on at 9 o'clock on Saturday night, and my only question is: was this designed just to give Auburn fans something to do this season?
Well, to be fair, we are up against a lot of college football on Saturday nights. But the way I figure it is that your team done already lost. You was playing in the 3:30 game, and so somewhere around 6:37, you have dinner. Around 8 o'clock, you argue with your spouse because they're not a fan. Y'all don't root for the same teams, and you're working on your marriage. And then at 9 o'clock, you turn me on, and all we do is just talk about the week that was in the news, and we're silly about it. We're not trying to pick sides on any of this stuff. There's so many shows, and if you look at my resume, I've worked for a lot of them and been on a lot of them. But it's just if it happened this week, we're gonna try and figure out a way to talk about it, crack a joke, and move on to the next thing.
I'm sure that there was a time, although I don't remember, when comedians like you, when you were at Comedy Central or wherever, I mean, you come in, you go, man, nothing happened this week. I mean, now something happens like every 5 seconds, doesn't it?
It is nonstop. Did you see the orange smoke cloud coming up in Georgia?
I did.
That was the I. That was like what's their next road game? Like that's how my brain goes. You start thinking about football. Well, all right, all right. The smoke fire, the chemical plant fire happened on a Sunday. If you look at the prevailing winds and you look at the remnants of Hurricane Helene, then maybe the winds will go away, and then the dogs have a better chance to practice this week. Or maybe I shouldn't put money on the dog. Like that's where my brain goes when everything is going on in this world now. It's like, how does this affect my team? But luckily for me, as one of the few Auburn fans still left in the Birmingham area, it's not always much that I have to think about right now this year.
Well, listen, I was just down in Auburn the other day, and things are going to be okay. Like not probably this year or next or maybe even the next year, but they will get better at some point. That's the cyclical nature of Auburn football.
I watch Florida State football to feel better about my fandom, Paul Finebaum. That's how
I,
bad it's gotten.
you grew up in Birmingham. I mean, literally, you mentioned the Legion Field connection. Your father and
Yeah,
I still cherish those moments. I got to work with him, one of the great legendary journalists in that area, and he was such a trailblazer. But how in the
thank you
world
for
did
that.
you become an Auburn fan growing up in Birmingham?
So here's what happened. We didn't move to Birmingham until the third grade. We get to
Okay.
Birmingham in the third grade, and I didn't know that this was such a crazy, you must pick a side type situation. Sixth grade, 1989. It was the year of Frank Thomas.
Oh yeah.
It was the rise of Charles Barkley. And there was a black quarterback at Auburn named Reggie Slack. And at the time, I was a huge Randall Cunningham fan. And I don't know if you ever saw Reggie Slack
Oh
at
yeah. Sure.
Auburn during
Absolutely.
those days. Okay, so he was very much a Randall Cunningham prodigy to a degree. So I was like, you know what? I like him. You know what? I'll root for the rest of the racism, Paul Firebaum. That's why I became an Auburn fan. They had a black quarterback, and he's black, I'm black, and I was like, you know what? Let me just see where this Tiger thing goes, and it's worked out for the most part.
No,
You
but a
know,
matter of fact, one of my first big stories in Alabama in the early '80s, I was a newspaper writer. I did an interview with Charles Thomas, who was Auburn's first black quarterback, and he really broke down the barriers because that was such a tough position for black young kids at the time in the South, I should
yeah,
say.
yeah. I mean, but it was definitely a thing where when I got to middle school in Birmingham, that's where you have to choose because they would have on for the Iron Bowl week on Fridays you wore your school and at the time in the 80s, and I can't believe I'm this old, UAB didn't have a football team. They weren't even the Blazers yet. They literally had no mascot. There was no dragon. It was just, that's the medicine school. And my mom worked there at the School of Optometry. So I would come to school spirit day for the Iron Bowl in a UAB shirt, which is basically like, I don't know, voting independent. Like everybody's going, you're stealing votes from Bama when you wear that UAB shirt. So that's when I kind of, finally just settled on being an Auburn fan. And I did not know that it would give me so much grief, because then Nick Saban would come and dominate an entire decade and a half. We're entering an era of college football where NIL is going to really change the idea of your team. Like, this is the first time I've watched college football, and now I'm legitimately wondering, well, who's my team going to pick up on the wire?
Right.
What free agent moves are we going to make? What students are we luring? You saw in Charlotte now, they got the high schoolers where if you go to a public high school, I guess in Charlotte or North Carolina, you can get NIL as well. So will that change recruiting? Hey, what do you say we need to put a couple of Camrys on that 4-star O lineman over there in Charlotte. Let's get him set up now to come here. Like it's I'm still a fan, in spite of the way that NIL is still evolving and changing the way that personnel move from place to place. You see what's happening over at UNLV. It's not going to be long before the same thing starts. You know what I'm shocked about? I'm shocked that the kid at least had enough decency to not come back for the next week. It's going to be kids quitting at halftime.
Yeah, no, there are. And
it's going to be a kicker,
some fans
game-winning field goal. Hey, coach, you better call timeout and get that money man on the phone. The check ain't cleared.
How